Welcome everyone to another edition of Indie Reads Aloud. Today we have an encore performance by one of our new favorite children's authors. She's just awesome. R.L. Fink is her name. I know her as Ruby because now she's become a friend, so we don't have to do this whole formal name thing anymore. But if
No.
you want to find her books, you'll find her as R.L. Fink. She grew up in Topanga, California, as the eldest of three, an avid listener, then reader of detective stories. The only thing better than writing detective novels would have been to become a character in one. But since that never happened, Ruby chose to write a detective series based on a middle school experience that never happened, but would have been fun if it did, with friends that never existed, but would have been fun if they had. Ruby studied film production at Chapman University's Dodge College with a minor in narrative and dramatic literature. She has enjoyed producing many audiobooks over the last several years and manages a small staff of freelance illustrators, audio engineers, and voice actors who make up the close-knit group that is Faux Fiction Audio. I'm so glad you're back!
So glad to be here again. Yay!
Yay! These characters are so much fun, and the
Oh,
stories are just a blast. I'm really enjoying these.
I'm
Um,
glad.
so, this is book 2 you're going to be reading today, which is Mickey McKinney, Boy Detective Troubles with Teamwork.
Yes, it is.
I wish I had some dramatic music, but I don't.
But I will send you some jazz music and we can play in some kind of sting next time I come.
That'll be fun.
Yeah.
So, Mickey McKinney is no longer See, Diana can't talk today. Mickey McKinney is no longer Maple Ridge Middle School's one and only private detective. Now there is a certain blonde by the name of Sam Hayes to share the office with, and the cases, who keeps giving away the candy. Tragic. So when Angus McDermott hires Mickey to help him ask Kalini Groom to the school dance, Mickey sees it as an opportunity to work one last solo case. Too bad for him, Kalini is the girl of his dreams. Uh-oh, I sense tension on the horizon. So, Ruby, I'm so excited to have you back. Please, when you are ready, take the microphone and read aloud.
Absolutely. Alrighty. Ready to go if you guys are ready. Chapter 1. The New Partner. The name's McKinney. Mickey McKinney. You give up a lot to wear your detective's hat just so, to stand out in a crowd as something other than the usual Johns and Janes going to and from classes, to provide clients with the solution to their every problem, answering questions like, "Where is my cat? Can you help me find my missing bike? Is that real beef casserole?" I have answered all these conundrums as best I can, with a steely resolve and hard-boiled demeanor that brooks no argument. But in choosing to follow this rambling road not usually taken, I have had to make do with only myself for company. Every client that walks through the door, I handle alone, and every payment I receive, I enjoy alone. Which is handy, because who would want to share a chocolate bar or a lollipop? Being a detective also means there are certain rules and guidelines that come with the job, like the customer is always right, and they better show they have the payment up front. It also means that once the job is done, I rarely see that person again, with the rare exception of Freddie, who is always curious about what is on his plate. All that time spent alone on the sidelines taught me that there is never anyone to watch my back, so I better watch my own. Most people would think I'm a little weird for wearing my dad's old hat or for spending my free time in a broom closet waiting for someone to walk in with a case, or for getting lost in my head while I start a story with internal monologue. I have accepted that, because for the last year or so, that was the world I lived in, and for the most part, I was content. Which leads me to the present, where, through a strange turn of events, the world I had known for so long had been turned on its head. My solo act had become a duo, as 5 feet 2 inches of sass-filled fatigues by the name of Sam Hayes had agreed to work as an assistant to yours truly. The paper sign on the door of my office now read McKinney and Hayes Investigations, and will continue to do so until the janitor tears it down. Again. It was the case of the absent answers that had brought around this partnership and started Sam's first week at our school with a bang. Born into a military family, Sam Hayes had been transferred from Colorado to Maple Ridge Middle School, the only educational institution in my small town of Maple Ridge, Vermont. Unfortunately for her, she had immediately fallen afoul of Tommy Tubbins, the school bully. Rather than hand over her lunch money to him like most of the other students would, including myself, she chose to trounce him soundly and left him crying on the floor like a baby. This, of course, had not set well with Tommy, and he had retaliated. He had done his best to frame Sam for stealing test answers from Miss Cavalier's desk, a crime of which I was able to clear Sam, successfully sending the real wrongdoer to the principal's office in the process. In the afterglow that followed the victory of justice for the innocent, I may have, in a moment of weakness, asked Sam if she would consider joining McKinney Investigations. For the record, I regretted it the day afterward, but it is a little hard to get rid of a girl who can do 50 handstand push-ups without breaking a sweat. Of course, there is always the hope that she will get tired of the detective business and go join an extreme sports team. And considering how well we've been getting along, our alliance is looking to be shorter lived by the minute. The week started out rough and has steadily gotten worse, like a gambler on a losing streak or an out of control garbage truck. In fact, it's all been downhill from the moment I showed her the office. "This place is a dump," Sam declared. Dump? I was scandalized. Sam surveyed the small broom closet that was the proud office of McKinney, and now Hayes Investigations, from the guttering bulb overhead to the small battered desk I'd found in the dumpster and dragged into the closet, to be used for its designated purpose a second time. "Yep, it's a dump," she repeated. "Do you know how I was able to get this office in the first place?" I asked indignantly. "I had to find the janitor's pet parrot." "Piece of cake," Sam scoffed. "It was in the air vents," I recalled with a shudder. I still had nightmares about being trapped in that confined space as a furious ball of feathers pecked and scratched at me. And that bird is the devil in green feathers. I barely made it out of there alive. So to show his gratitude for such a heroic feat, Joe the janitor lets you use his mop closet during study hall. Sam smirked. Personally, I would have been happy with a gift card. "Can a gift card get you an office space to use during break periods?" I asked. "No, but it can get me something of actual value," Sam said, "like boxing gloves or a smoothie." I bristled. If not for this office, I would not have the thriving business that makes me Maple Ridge Middle School's only private detective. "Yeah, you're really packing in the customers." Sam pointed at the spider's web that had been spun in one corner of the broom closet. "I'm guessing that's your 2 o'clock, right?" I forced myself to take a deep breath. "A quick temper will make a fool of you soon enough," my dad used to say. Besides, what did it matter if this gal walked out? This office was clearly not big enough for the both of us. "Obviously, we have differing opinions on this matter," I said, gritting my teeth. Sam took a step forward and looked down at me from her great height. She was only a few inches taller than me, but I may as well have been staring up at the Maple Ridge clock tower. "Oh, we differ on many more matters than this, Fedora Head. We just don't have time to go through them all." I glowered at her, unable to come up with an appropriate comeback. "Shut up," I finally said. Sam snorted derisively. "Ooh, burn." The way things were going on Monday, I figured we'd be lucky enough to last until Wednesday morning. And it appeared my faithful assistant, I mean my partner, Thought the same thing, because the office was empty when I opened on Tuesday afternoon. Considering I had caught sight of her playing basketball with the eighth graders when I went to grab lunch, there was a good chance she had lost interest in being the abbot to my Costello. This was just as well, because if Miss Smartmouth had been in the office, she would have scared off the client who knocked on the door. The kid didn't so much open the door as crack it open to slide through, very clearly trying not to be seen and obviously uncomfortable being the center of attention. At 4'10" and skinny as a rake, he wasn't much to look at. His brown hair was cut into a bowl shape, and his eyes were the color of mud. Throw in his hoodie, the color of manure, and a pair of shorts and sneakers of a dull gray, it all added up to the most inconspicuous wallflower I'd ever seen. This was someone who was comfortable standing in the background, someone who would not make anyone look twice. "Would you be Mickey McKinney?" he asked in a voice that lilted and was different from that of the usual Johns and Janes. I would like to apologize before I continue. I cannot do a Scottish accent, but I'm doing my darndest here, so just bear with me, guys. Probably. I don't see anyone else behind the desk. I leaned back in my chair and put my feet on the desk. "What can I do for you, kid?" My prospective client glanced around the tiny office. "I heard you were a detective of sorts," the kid said, sounding doubtful. "Well, if you heard it, that must mean it's true," I said, making an attempt at humor. "Was I mistaken then?" The kid looked crestfallen. "Frank, in my art class, said you were good at solving problems. I've got a giant jawbreaker for you if you can help me." He pulled a piece of candy the size of a baseball out of his pocket. That got my interest. "Well, why didn't you say so?" I said, taking my feet off the desk. "Pull up a chair and tell me what's on your mind." The stranger looked around my cramped office, uncertainty written on his round features. I don't see any chair," the kid said. "Must have run off with the sofa," I said mildly. "Grab a bucket, then." I kicked a paint-splattered bucket in his general direction, and he sat gingerly on the red, overturned plastic. "What's your name, kid?" My prospective client twisted the bag that held his jawbreaker, still looking unsure. Angus McDermott." "I'm going to go out on a limb and say you're not from around here." "I am from Invergary." Geography was never one of my strengths. "Is that past the gas station?" I asked. "It is a town in Dundee." Angus was looking a little irritated. "Scotland?" "I'll take your word for it." I leaned back in my chair again and clasped my hands behind my head. "So, what can I help you with?" "I want you to help me ask the most beautiful girl in the world to the dance next Friday," Angus said in a rush. "Little melodramatic for this early in the afternoon," I said, trying to smother a laugh. After all, the kid looked so serious. I didn't want to hurt his feelings and lose a client at the same time. "Who's the lucky girl?" "Kailani Groom," Angus said, with the reverence of an ardent admirer. "Oh." Kailani Groom. Now there was a lady who was as pretty as... Well, leaving aside for the moment I didn't have anything to compare her to, Angus wasn't wrong in his description. Kai Groom cruised right past easy on the eyes and kept on going well past gorgeous. Or, at least, that was the opinion of most of the boys at our school. She was tall for a 7th grader, with skin like cream soda and hair that cascaded down to her waist like a black licorice waterfall. The story was, she had moved from Maui when she was 10, and she still looked like she belonged on a beach, always dressed in colorful dresses and skirts, with a flower clipped behind her right ear. There would be no shortage of competition, and I couldn't help thinking that Angus McDermott from however you pronounce it, Dundee, was putting way too much faith in the power of yours truly. On the other hand, I looked at the giant jawbreaker Angus held. I had always been a sucker for an obvious underdog. "Tell you what, kid," I said, leaning forward on my desk. "You fill me in on what you want, and I'll let you know if it's possible." Angus gazed at me with hopeful eyes. "I want her to fall in love with me." Not only was this kid an underdog, but he was also shooting for the stars. "What do I look like?" I demanded. "Cupid? This is a mop by my elbow, not a bow and arrow." Maybe this wasn't such a good idea after all. Angus stood up, discouraged, and tucked the jawbreaker into his pocket. Whoa, let's not be hasty, I said, before he could open the door. I hadn't had any sugar since breakfast and my energy was dropping fast. I may not be much of a hand in the cherub department, but I know a few ways to charm a lady, I said, trying to sound confident. Really? Angus turned around, his brown eyes reminding me of a puppy dog. I half expected him to wag his tail. Sure, I said. You ever talk to her in person? Oh, well, that's the interesting thing, Angus stuttered. When I transferred to Maple Ridge, I joined the theater department, and she was the one who showed me around the school. He sighed and sat back down on the bucket. Have you heard her recite Shakespeare? The words sound like music. So that's a no. Angus sighed again. Well, I tried to strike up a conversation with her since then, but well, she's so, and she's always. I held up a hand to stop him, and Angus ceased, flushing. I get the picture, I said dryly. Maybe you should try writing her a few anonymous love letters to get her attention. Angus looked at me, bafflement and confusion etched across his pale, round face. How will she fall for me if she doesn't know who they're from? Look, kid, ladies like a little mystery, I told him. We'll catch her interest with a few notes, some flowers maybe. I'll snoop around and find some other things she likes, and then bam! Next Thursday before the dance, we'll reveal your identity, and you can take your Cinderella to the ball. His eyes lit up. And this will work? Sure, nothing to it. I tried to sound as if playing Cupid was something Mickey McKinney did on a regular basis. Listen, Romeo, we do a few days of poetry and candy, and we'll have her in your arms by next Thursday. Really? Angus leapt to his feet and shook my hand fervently. Thank you. Thank you very much. Of course, my pleasure, I grunted as I tried to pry my fingers loose. The kid had a grip like gum and hair. I'll go get started. Angus released my hand and picked up his backpack. Maybe I'll go to the library and look at poetry. My phone beeped and I pulled it out. There was another client waiting for me in the art classroom. Time to get this kid out and move on to my next job. Yeah, you go do that, I said, edging around him and opening the door for him. Oh, before you go. I held it in my hand. Oh, yes, of course. Angus placed the bag with the large jawbreaker in my hand. I wonder if she'll like roses or daisies. Angus continued to brainstorm. I mean, she's always wearing those flower clips to match her dresses, but I don't actually know what's her favorite. I'll try and find out for you, I said, and nudged him out. You will? Angus looked at me with the light of hero worship in his mud-brown eyes. Comes with the job, kid. It's called field work, I said, and gave him another nudge. Well, goodbye then. As he crossed the threshold, he almost ran into Miss Smartmouth, who was finally showing up for work. Oh, excuse me, lass. The kid dashed off, and my hopefully soon-to-be ex-partner sauntered in. Was that a client? Sam asked. She eyed the bucket Angus had just vacated with distaste and remained standing. It was. I closed the door behind her. You going to tell me about the case? Sam persisted, folding her arms. If you'd been on time, you could have heard it yourself. But you're late, I snapped, stuffing the jawbreaker in my backpack to enjoy later, so I'm handling the case. Traffic was a bear, Sam retorted sarcastically, leaning against the wall. Does that mean that if I'm here and a client shows up, I can take a case for myself? Sure, I said. The idea of Miss Extreme Sports sitting still was ridiculous. If you happen to catch a case when I'm not here, you can have it. But you won't, because you'd rather be outside than here. Sam's chin jutted out. The only reason why I don't show up as much is because it means I'm stuck in here looking at your face. Her lips twitched upwards slightly in a smirk. But if sticking around when you're not here gets me a client, I'd say that's a win-win situation. Fine, I snapped. I dare you to take a case without me. We'll see who ends up with a satisfied client. My phone beeped with another message, and I dug it out of my pocket, turning away from Miss Irritating so she couldn't read it. We've got a client in the arts classroom. Sam was using her superior height to look over my shoulder. Too late, I remembered she was the height of a giraffe. Yes, I admitted reluctantly. You should probably come along. Unless, I had a sudden idea. You want to stay down here and hold down the fort? Sam considered it for a moment. Nah, I should come along, see the master at work, and learn the ropes. Oh. I felt my hopes dashed like a piece of sugar glass hitting the floor. Well, come on then, I sighed. The client is waiting. Oh, cheer up, McGrumpy. Sam clapped a hand on my shoulder as I opened the door for her. Why? I scowled as we hurried down the hallway. You think this case will be interesting? Sam smiled at me. Nah, but if you frown for too long, your face might get stuck that way. And that is the end of chapter 1.
Thank you so much. So much fun. Oh my gosh. These characters are just such a blast.
They are.
So this book is a little bit different than the first one. What was it about this book that drew you to this story, these characters? What was your favorite part about writing this second book?
Well, for the most part, when I first started writing it, I just wanted to create as many situations as possible that could go horribly wrong that they would have to fix. So just domino effect. One problem happens, then another problem happens, then another problem happens, and also to get two characters who are very, very different to sort of work together after fighting for so long. And this is a really interesting story, not just for me, but I think for the characters as well, because Mickey has been on his own for a very long time.
Sure.
And I think anyone who has been on their own for a very long time, having to bring someone into their space, they often have to change and
learn to adjust, adapt. Yeah.
And that is not something that he wants to do. Not only because he likes the way that things are, in a sense, but also there's the worry that Sam will leave just when he starts to rely on her.
Sure.
So it's definitely a battle of wanting to keep things the way they are, but also observing how things are a little bit better with her around, and also being afraid of things getting better with her around. Because
sure, yeah, I think it's a common theme that growth is a tentative thing, right? Yep. Because it's uncomfortable. So that's a pretty cool storyline to weave as a subplot running through. So I really appreciate that. Thank you so much for joining us again. I really appreciate your time, and these are just super fun books, and I'm definitely looking forward to the third one. It's going to be a blast.
Yes.
Thank you so much for coming out and reading again for us today.
You're very welcome. I'm happy to be here.
Have a great night.
You too. Bye.